Do you know that your last name might have come from a slave owner? Not a name your family chose, the name of a man who owned your ancestor like property. First, hear me out. These people had names, real names that meant something. Among the Yoruba of West Africa, a name was a prayer said over a child at birth. Babatunde meant father has returned. Ayomide meant my joy has arrived. Among the Akan people of Ghana, children were named after the day they were born. Born on a Friday, you were Kofi. Your name told the world who you were before you could speak a single word. Your name was your family's entire history compressed into one word. By the 1500s, Europe had land in the Americas. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, crops that would make them extraordinarily wealthy. But they needed workers, millions of them, working for free. So they built a system. Ships left Europe loaded with guns and manufactured goods, sailed to the west coast of Africa, traded those goods for captured people, crossed the Atlantic, dropped off the people, loaded up with crops, sailed back to Europe, a triangle drawn across the entire ocean in blood. Between the 1500s and 1800s, that triangle swallowed over 12 million people whole. The journey across the ocean had a name, the Middle Passage. Enslaved people were packed into the holds of ships so tightly they could not sit up or roll over, chained together in pairs by their ankles, lying in darkness for weeks, sometimes months. Disease spread through those holds like wildfire. Nearly 2 million people died before they ever reached land. So many bodies thrown overboard that sharks began following the slave ships all the way across the Atlantic. The moment you stepped off that ship, they took your name before anything else, because the first thing you do to an enslaved person is strip their identity, and the easiest way to do that is replace their name. Some got Bible names, Ruth, Noah, Joseph. Others got Roman god names, Hercules, Caesar, Pompey, Venus. The most powerful names in ancient history stamped onto people not allowed to look their owner in the eye. Others got named after ports the ships came from, Bristol, London, Dublin. Not a human being, a shipping address. During all of this, enslaved people were never given a last name, just a first name. That was it, because a last name meant you belonged to a family. It meant you had a history that existed before this plantation. Generations of people were born and raised, children and buried parents, and never once had a last name to pass down. The only name connected to their existence on any official document was the name of the owner himself. But they kept something hidden. Many enslaved families carried secret surnames for generations, completely hidden from their owners, passed down in whispers after dark, so that no matter what they were called out in the fields, inside that child there was still something that belonged to home. Historian Herbert Gutman found evidence of this in plantation records. Secret family names surviving quietly through generations. Not on any document, just carried in memory like a flame protected from the wind. Then 1865 hits. Slavery is abolished. 4 million people wake up free for the first time in their lives, or their parents' lives, or their grandparents' lives, and almost immediately the government shows up. Congress created the Freedmen's Bureau to help formerly enslaved people transition to citizenship, and one of the very first things it needed was names. Full legal names, first and last, 4 million people. No official last name, and the government was in a hurry. In some cases, federal officials just filled in the surname themselves and wrote down the name of the most recent master without even asking. Think about what these people had available to them in that moment. No documents connecting them to Africa. No written family records. No birth certificates. The only name that had ever appeared next to their existence on any official paper was the master's name, on the plantation records, on the auction documents, on the sale receipts that described them as property. It was the only reference point available when the question needed answering that same afternoon. A freed slave named Martin Jackson described that moment himself. He said the master's name was usually adopted more because it was the logical thing to do and the easiest way to be identified than out of any affection for the master. But there was another reason nobody talks about. Families had been separated, sold apart to different plantations across different states, and the master's name was sometimes the only thread left connecting them to each other. If your brother had already taken the master's name and you took a completely different one, the paper trail connecting you disappeared. Taking the same name was sometimes the only way to find each other again. But not everyone took it. Some reached back as far as they could, going past the most recent owner to an older name from their grandparents' time. Not because that name was better, but because the further back they went, the further they got from the person who had last owned them. Others chose names that pointed forward: Freeman, Justice, Washington, Lincoln. One Virginia mother changed her son's name from Jeff Davis, the name the master used, to Thomas Grant. For the first time in her life, she got to name her own child. Then there was Frederick Bailey, born a slave in Maryland in 1818. He escaped in 1838 dressed in a sailor's uniform, carrying borrowed papers. The moment he reached free land, the first thing he did was shed that name. He became Frederick Johnson first, but there were too many Johnsons where he landed, so he took the name Douglas from a character in a Scottish poem. A warrior, a name that belonged to no plantation, no owner, no ledger. For the first time in his life, a name that was entirely his own. Then about 100 years later, Malcolm Little looked at his last name and understood exactly where it came from. Which plantation, which owner, which ledger it had crawled out of and been passed through generations without anyone questioning it. He replaced it with a single letter, X, not a new name, a blank space where a stolen identity used to be. A wound kept open on purpose so nobody would forget what had been taken. He said it himself. The real names of our people were destroyed during slavery. Just gone. So here's why slaves took their master's last name. Because they had no other option in that moment. Because the government needed them registered that same afternoon. Because the only name connected to their entire existence was the name of the man who owned them. Because families used that name as the only thread still holding them together. And because after a lifetime of having everything taken from them, choosing which name to carry forward was finally their own decision, even if the options were all wrong. The act of choosing was itself a kind of freedom. Those names got passed down from great-grandfather to grandfather, from grandfather to father, father to you, and most people carrying those names today have no idea where they really came from.